Okay, so we're live. Gotta make sure my audio is working. I had a problem with audio last time. Ba, 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 ba. Can you check, please? And then I'll go to my own, on my phone, I'll go to YouTube, my own YouTube. Thanks for joining. We'll get started here in the next minute. Just making sure my audio is working. Just making sure my audio is working. Look at that. I love it. Today we're working on a research paper. It's part 6. It's probably going to be the final paper or video stream in the series. I don't expect to get through the whole agenda. Their link is in the description. There's an agenda in the description. It's just a link to this blog article so you can read the agenda, and I will actually be editing it. I'll be editing this blog article during the stream. Got these new flavored Doritos, Ultimate Cheddar. All right, I think the red nacho cheddar is still the way to go. So I don't expect to get through this whole agenda, but maybe we do. Specifically, I think we can get through step 9, and I think step 10. I'm not going to get through. I hope I didn't just hear my dogs going off. Yeah, so there's 10 things that I got to do. And then the Grammarly, I might not completely do that on the stream because it's super boring, but I will do some of it to show y'all what it means. Because it's an important step. All right, so let's take it from the top. So what are we doing? Basically, I wrote the first draft of the paper. So in part 5, I had finished my basic analysis. So let's actually, one of these YouTube tabs is my part 5. Yeah. Hold on, let's see this. This is supposed to be funny. Let's just watch a little funny.
What? What the hell? What happened?
They came to Jerusalem!
Who's they?
The goddamn leaves! Son, we need your help. Take the sword.
But, Dad, I'm a heretic.
It doesn't matter. Defend the Holy Land!
It's so stupid. So in the future, I might do some reaction videos, but I don't want to get off topic today. My channel, kind of put this to the side over here. Great. So part 5, we'll go over the last 30 seconds, and you can see my VS Code stated do files. And you'll see, and we're just going to cover, so there's 2 files that I was working on, and then since then there have been like 5, and so I'm just going to go step through each file. It's not actually going to take a lot of time, but just, hey, what have I done since that last stream? That's the first part of the agenda. We're using that model, but it does tend to have like a. Okay, so you see in the background here, analysis to basic exploration.do. So what I did there is I derived a strong model. So this is my method of model derivation. I have a systematic approach. It's like a genetic algorithm. You can apply it to any analysis. It's a kitchen sink plus horse racing, round robin model identification method. You can read more about it here. And I'll be honest with you, I've had a paper rejected for using this approach because some people think it's like too data science-y, and it's not economic. There's not enough economic theory in there. Because what I do is I take my data set, and in my opinion, the theoretical, scholarly, analytical guidance comes from regulation of the input data. So whatever data I put in, it's going to optimize among that data set. And then I also select the dependent and independent variables. But sometimes there are multiple dependent variable candidates, and the comparative fit is better for certain dependent variables sometimes. And I think it's totally legitimate and, in fact, a good idea to let the data tell you which dependent variable is more predictable. But I've had that criticized, and they said it was overfit. But even though it is overfit, unless you do out of model and out of sample testing, so like forward testing, random split of your current sample testing, or multiple specification factor robustness across specification testing. So those are ways to ensure that you're not doing overfit. In the absence of those, I would agree, it is overfit. But the paper that was rejected, I did robustness checks, and in the current paper, I use this approach again, and I do robustness checks again. So, and I'll quickly just right now mention why. There's two ways to measure skill gaps in the literature. One is with overqualification, and the other is without overqualification penalties. So if you ever had, like my grandmother has been doing stuff for years and years, and she's worked in real estate, etc. And now she's like pretty old. She tries to go for a new job, and they will say, "Oh, you're overqualified." Even though she's going for like a junior to mid role, she's not even going for a senior role. They'll say that she's overqualified, and it's this weird thing where, for a junior to mid role, she's overqualified, but for senior roles, she's like they don't want her for senior roles either. So it could just be low-key age discrimination. But there is this idea of overqualification, whether that means like legitimate overqualification means we, the employer, would feel bad for using you in a suboptimal, like we're not leveraging all your skills and you should go for a more senior role. That would be kind of the nice thing that they're saying, but then you can't get a job for the senior role for whatever reason. And oftentimes it's like maybe you did something in a technically old way for years and years and you haven't refreshed your skill set. And so the senior roles, they want you to be sharp on the skills, but you're not sharp on the skills. So the senior roles will throw you out, junior roles will throw you out, and you're just left with nothing. And one answer is refresh your skills. And I think that actually helps. But if you do refresh your skills, they can still say it when really it's just age discrimination, but they're kind of like making it look like it's not. So that's the idea of overqualification, like you're overqualified for this role. Another reason that I think overqualification is sometimes used, even though it's not accurate, it's kind of like a guise for age discrimination. I think it's also a guise for like managerial intimidation. Like the manager is scared you're going to take their job because actually you're applying to report to that manager, but you are a good fit for the manager role and actually maybe a better fit than the manager themselves. And so they're intimidated at hiring time. And so they will state overqualification. And really they just don't want to try to manage someone who is like really technically their superior. That can be intimidating. Okay, so overqualification effects are a real thing. Scholars know about them. But most skills gap analysis, when people talk about, we have people graduating from college and there's a skill gap, they ignore overqualification for the most part. And there's a really great book right now, and I cite this book. It is the founder of Degreed. The founder of Degreed wrote a new book, David Blake, okay? Degreed, awesome. David Blake, awesome. The expertise economy, and in the expertise economy, they talk about the skills quotient, which is a skill gap measure. It's like, and this is very recent. This is 2018. This is like the state of the art skill gap measure. And there's no such thing as overqualification. In fact, it says so in this very article right here. Caveat. There's a caveat to the equation. Your skill level for any skill cannot exceed the maximum required. So basically, they're just saying there's no such thing as overqualification. If your skill level is that high, like if we require an 8 and you're a 10, then you're just a fit. You just meet the requirement. It's not bad. And so that is actually a pretty widespread approach in the literature, and that is skill gaps without overqualification effects. So I measure it both ways. My data set allows me to measure it both ways. And then I run analysis on both of them. And what I find is, just to give away the result, I find that ignoring overqualification results in better modeling. And more specifically, in better ordinary least squares linear regression, multiple regression. And I think that's because overqualification takes different shapes and even different signs depending on the skill. So like some skills, like technical skills, let's say, or even some social skills, it's actually a good thing for you to be overqualified. Whereas for other skills, it's a bad thing for you to be overqualified. That's it. So I think the sign, like positive and negative, I think the sign actually switches. But then even among those where it's positive, I think it's curved, and that the curves are of different shapes. And this gets really noisy. And basically, when you're doing a linear analysis, the data fit is optimized by just ignoring those effects. And the curve thing is not speculative. There's like a paper, and I cite the skills quotient, and then I also cite the curve. In one study, conscientiousness. So conscientiousness, it's actually like a personality trait, although some psychologists will say that you can train it to improve it, but it's arguably not even a skill, which is another potential criticism of my paper. I'm treating anything which would play into your like job efficacy as a skill, even if it's like classically not a skill, and this would be considered a personality trait, not really a skill. But anyway, conscientiousness exhibited a parabolic relationship. That is, it's not just a nada with like decreasing marginal and then flattening out like a growth curve. It actually decreases. So this is kind of surprising because everyone thinks conscientiousness is really great. What they don't realize is like too much conscientiousness is a thing in a team setting. So think of that guy, and maybe I've been this guy, who's like super hardworking, like crazy hardworking, crazy attention to detail, and it actually just gets to be somewhat overbearing to the other teammates who don't care that much. So conscientiousness exhibits a parabolic relationship with peer-rated team contribution. So that is what it's basically like team approval. So be an 8 out of 10, not a 10 out of 10 conscientiousness. Here's the study, Kurtzu. Here's my bib file. Remus Illies, like I don't know who these people are. But anyway, personality characteristics that are valued in teams, not always more is better. Okay. So it's not just like it's not just speculative to say that the per skill the curves are different, and that's why overqualification effects are basically adding noise to an ordinary least squares linear multiple regression. Cool. So that was, yeah. So today's agenda, I'm going to quickly discuss this, CARS, how to write a paper in a weekend. I'm not actually going to go through the whole thing, the notes are here. Review the prior stream, we did that. I got through the strong model. What does strong model mean? You can refer to this paper. Basically, there's all the factors all together is called the kitchen sink. Then if you drop factors until you have each particular factor is more likely than not to have an effect, that's a p-value less than 0.5. Okay, that would be the weak model. So the kitchen sink is actually like the super weak model, which is just a super weak model. It's just it has more factors than the weak model, and the p-values of at least one factor is above 0.5. That is a super weak model. It's not like the super weak model. It's like a class that refers to many. So the kitchen sink is a special super weak model, which is like all the available factors. You just drop them in. And that's like a dangerous thing to do, right? Like you're just dumping in factors, not really thinking about it. Well, you are thinking about it because you're regulating the input data. But still, you're dumping in all the input data. Okay, and so then you round robin reduce factors by p-value until you get to the weak model. The next one is a adjusted R-squared maximizing model. So R-squared is the explanatory power of a model. It is how well your independent factors are able to explain the variation in the dependent variable, like as a percent. And so just jump in my paper real quick. I have this table. So like this is talking about industry effects. Let's talk about state effects. That's probably more intuitive. So states have different demographics. They have different cultures. Like in Texas, there's like a Texan culture, and it's not the same as the demographic. So the Texan culture or the Tex-Mex culture is distinct from white identity, Hispanic identity. Actually, it's really a mixture of those. So like white and Hispanic go way back together in the Texas setting. And you can even see it in the blending of the food, like Tex-Mex food. It's not really Mexican food, and it's definitely not American food. It's like Mexican food with a ton of cheese on it, and it's great. And plus some barbecue, and it's super good. I'm a little bit hungry. I got this Reese's right here. These are the Reese's sticks. Anyway, and so there's cultural effects, demographic effects, and of course, policy. Different states have different policy. So state effects just says, hey, the respondent lives in this state. There could be underlying demographic, cultural, political stuff going on. But the independent variable itself is literally just like what state you live in, like Virginia or whatever. And you can see the R-squared of robust state effects is 0.503. So that means if I know what state you're from, and if I guess the left-hand response 100 times, probably going to get it right like 5 times. That's a really bad interpretation. But basically, it's a percentage of explanation of fit. So your state describes, and what is the dependent variable? It is your willingness to hire non-college graduates. Okay, so they don't have a college degree, but they do have an alternative credential. Alternative credential is like Udacity Nano degree, certification, certified project manager, any of those. Any credential that shows like it's a credential. It's supposed to show that you have skills, but it's not a traditional credential, which would be an accredited college degree, high school diploma. Those are traditional, right? So we're ignoring those. If you went to a boot camp as a coder, that's an alternative credential. Your portfolio, if you're an artist, a portfolio of work is an alternative credential. And so the question is like, would you hire someone who's not a college graduate, but they have an alternative credential on a scale of 1 to 10? And there's like this 5% of the result is explained by what state you're from. Cool. Review of the prior stream. What has been done since. Section by section, walk through the paper. Grammarly. Use Grammarly to update the spelling, grammar. I get the Grammarly Pro, so it has like tone and stuff too, which is really important. Journal targeting. So journals will say stuff like word count of the abstract, word count of the paper itself, page count, limitations, minimums, maximums, how many figures and tables you're allowed to have and or required to have. So you have to like change your paper to fit it to actually target a journal, which I haven't done yet. And I'll also go through how I select the journal. One approach is when you write your paper, you end up citing other people. So like consider those journals. Two is there's something called Cabell's, which is like a database of like likelihood to get published, as well as impact factor, like how important is the journal, as well as how long does it take time for them to review. And I get this for free because I have a university association, Cabell's Scholarly Analytics. So George Mason University allows me to access Cabell's. Yeah, and so like if you're associated with a university, you can probably get Cabell's or the same information through another service, but like this is like a really popular one. If you're an independent researcher, and even if you're at a think tank, by the way, the think tank will often have Cabell's, or will be associated to a university partnership that will have Cabell's. If you're legit independent, you can pay for Cabell's if you got money, but it's kind of expensive. You might actually consider like reaching out to a university and seeing if they can get you in through like a research program on the side, or even just like enrolling as a student at a cheap community college, one class a semester, like just to access their enterprise tooling. It might be financially better for you to go that way. Then you can like access all the journal articles and stuff too. Some of these journal articles, it's like $40 to download a single paper. It's like, what? I'd never pay that. You can email the, a lot of times you can email the person who wrote the paper and they may be allowed to provide you a free copy. It's not like cheating or anything. Like they're allowed to do that in a lot of cases. Like the journal will let them do that. Okay. So we'll do journal targeting. Oh yeah, and those are the three ways. So one is like the papers that you cite, consider those journals. Two is you search through Cabell's for journals that basically match keywords. Like for me, mine is an education paper, and I could look for a few others. So I would look for education journals, which Cabell's tells me has a high chance of publication as balanced for, it's like a weighting game. So you want to have the balance of chance of publication, time to review, and impact, like a journal that matters, that people read. And the third way to select a journal is, I forgot. Thought I had a third way. Yeah, I don't know. Right, so after you factor on journal targeting, walk through again. And you might say, hey, why don't you knock out all this stuff first and then walk through it once at the end? And my answer is, I think walking through the whole paper over and over again, reading it from top to bottom, as a writer, it makes me write a better paper. I'll just catch things that I didn't catch the time before. So like take a nap or whatever, read the paper again fresh the next day. And that's part of the reason that I disagree with Carr's idea that you can write a paper in a weekend. Okay, then collate and resolve peer review feedback. So I've gotten informal peer review feedback. Here's a couple that they actually sent me a document. I'm not going to name names, but thank you very much to everyone who sent me feedback. If you would like credit, I'm happy to give you a shout out. Just let me know. But for now, they will be called MB and ZB. And these are the two that actually provided me a document. They're not the only ones. I also anticipated some issues myself. I think if you've written a paper well and you've been critically minded, you should be able to anticipate some issues. And it's not the case that you need to resolve every issue prior to circulating your first draft. In fact, you really shouldn't do that. Get the draft done. Go back through it. Some of them are kind of necessities prior to journal submission. You need to have a journal target prior to submission. You need to have your grammar and wording and spelling. But some of these, like this overfit, I will not address that because it takes up space and I'll be kicking myself out of letters journals. So letters journals, they want you to have like very small number of pages, like 10 or 20 or less. So if you address every potential issue, you're not going to be able to submit your manuscript to a letters journal. It's going to be too big. Like my paper is currently 13, inclusive of citation, and I might actually have to cut it down a little for certain letters journals, or I could increase it if I don't want a letters journal. So like a small paper is just a general good practice. If you have a big paper, it's harder to cut it up into little papers than it is to have little papers that you merge into a bigger paper. So one example is, by the way, all my research is totally open. My GitHub, Vanderveer, the repository's research dissertation case for alt ed. That's not my only data science repo. I also have data science practice. And then like Dino utility text to text is a data science utility. There's even some stuff in like LEU tools and kind of scattered around. But for my dissertation, this is the repository. So I have one paper which is Alt COVID Grit Ocean. It's kind of the technical name. And this is a survey where I asked people like, did the coronavirus change their favorability, like willingness to hire alternative credential applicants? The answer is like, yes, it boosted it. Actually, they're more favorable. But in the same survey, I asked them about their personality. So I could write one paper with all that stuff, or I could write two different papers, one on personality, one on coronavirus. And I'm actually going to write the two. And then if people are like, hey, this is like too light and like it's missing stuff, I can merge them. But they may never raise that objection, and I might get two publications. And if I merge it, I can't submit to the letters journals. If I don't merge it, I can. So I'm basically shooting myself in the foot by making it big first. So go small first. And editors like small papers anyway. It's easier for them to read. So go small and grow if needed. And don't raise an objection. Like, don't object to yourself in your own paper. If that's going to make your paper look terrible. Your first manuscript that you submit, it should be like, I'm awesome. I did everything right. And this is just the reality of getting published. It's like, I don't want to get into it, but like the peer review system is actually not really great. There's a lot of terrible research that gets published. So there's two questions before you. One is, do you actually want to get published? Or two is, do you actually want to do research? In an ideal world, you can have both. You really can't have both though. For the purpose of my dissertation, I'm wanting to write a publishable paper. That's my requirement. After I get the dissertation, the game changes, right? After I get the degree, I can actually do the research that I kind of care about. And it's a sad but true, that's just a reality of getting your PhD and getting published. It's kind of a sad but true situation. But it's really not a big deal. It's just kind of like, there's just norms in any industry. Like if you're coding, there's just certain things you do, which it's like you do that because that's like the normal way to do it. And like your team's going to expect it, etc. It's not necessarily a bad thing. So the expectation is that you submit it and you're like, I'm awesome. Then they will say, hey, here's the problem with it. You fix that and then you get published. And they're not going to call out every possible issue. Like I've submitted manuscripts that I was like, there's like a dozen issues in here. Like I submitted it. They only raised a couple. I already had answers. Well, for one of them, I had answers ready. For the other, it was kind of like I didn't have answers ready and I actually disagreed with them. But your reviewer is always right. If you want to get published, even if your reviewer is actually wrong, go along with it. I mean, if you're like a bigwig hotshot, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's not the case. But like for me, I'm kind of a noob. So the advice I've been given, and it worked because I got published, is the reviewer is always right. Cool. So as I said, I don't expect to get through all this tonight. I might, but basically I think I'm going to do the submission package on my own. Submission package, once you have a finalized manuscript that's targeted to a journal, you actually have to upload that into a online system for uploading manuscripts. And there's a different one for every publisher. And that kicks off the peer review process. A lot of times you have to pay them money, which is another reason it's measure twice, cut once, or measure 3 times. So I actually go through my whole manuscript at least 3 times. So I did a draft. I had some of my friends walk through it. Thank you to them. I'm going to walk through it. Then that will result in a redraft. Grammarly, I'm going to step through it with Grammarly, and Grammarly is going to force me to basically reread the whole thing again, reflect on my tone. So that's going to be a second read through. And I usually go with the journal targeting together with that. Potentially that could be 2 and 3 or just 2. So you see, I go through the whole paper, literally write the paper 3 times over. And every subsequent time it's much faster, right? Because the first time I don't even actually know the results. I mean, yeah, I do. So what I really do is while I'm doing the analysis, I'm jotting myself notes. And I kind of think of that as a revision of the paper, but it's really not. When I go through and I organize it, that becomes the first draft. So really for every real draft, you know the results of the analysis already. Except you can stumble, when you're reading it and you're like, hey, this doesn't quite make sense. It can make you think of a new analytical question that you need to go find out the answer. That definitely happens. That's already happened to me with this paper with conscientiousness. Okay, anyway, so you get your manuscript, it's ready. You need to upload it to a specific journal, and you have to have a submission package. So they don't just want the PDF output, they also want the source files. A lot of times they will ask you to split and anonymize your manuscript. So what's the manuscript, by the way? It's just the paper. Here is my manuscript. This is a working paper. In other words, it's not finalized. But it's my current manuscript. It's built from tech files. And I'm on Windows, so I'm using TechWorks. And I'm actually using LaTeX, which is a flavor of tech. I've never had to use any other flavor. And I like this one. So I compile it. It generates the PDF manuscript. Now, if you have a double-blind journal, actually, Journal of LaTeX templates, I need to stop saying this because it showed up on SSRN. I had to laugh when this happened. Look at this shit right here. Journal of LaTeX templates forthcoming. That was inside of the template provided to me by Elsevier, which is a publisher. So they give me Else article, which is a pre-formatting tech template. Yeah. So I just need to not include that. And actually, I'm going to go in my other papers and not include that too. Alt Cobbett Great Ocean, let's hide it. Survey short has already been published, so I don't know if I want to, whatever. 127 effects, yep. So this first page has my name on it, right? The first page has the abstract and the title and my name. So a lot of times they will have you split and anonymize your manuscript, which means...
Huskies got out.
They got out?
Someone has them.
Oh gosh, okay. All right, well,